Hello, everyone, and welcome back to NIL Edge. Today, we are so excited to talk to Lauren Campbell, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Firefly Recovery. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well today and excited to be here.
I'm excited to continue our conversation. We first met at AthleteCon in Las Vegas. So shout out to Sam Green and her team for having awesome people get together to talk about NIL and collegiate athletics. But first, before we hop into it, tell me about your background and how you got to where you are with Firefly today.
Absolutely. So, yes, shout out AthleteCon. That was a great event, fun in Vegas. In terms of my background, after business school, I went to University of Chicago, studied marketing and finance, really wanted to go into CPG, and I spent about 20 years at Nestle across anything you can think of from new product development, sports marketing, digital marketing, et cetera, and really had obviously a very big brand experience, but always wanted the opportunity to go to a small brand. And when Nestle relocated to Arlington, Virginia from Los Angeles, where I live, I decided to start my own consulting business. And one of my first clients was Firefly. And that relationship just continued to grow and grow as our business did, to where I've been able to join full time and become CMO and a partner in the business. And that's how I got to Firefly Recovery.
That's awesome. When we first talked, and you just mentioned it too, your background with Nestle, you were very familiar with sports marketing in general. And maybe you can talk a little bit about your work with Shaquille O'Neal and some of the other sports related things that you did. But so, like I said, obviously you had that sports background. When NIL first passed and it became a reality, why did Firefly want to get involved with NIL?
So, yes, going back to Nestle, Nestle had a lot of relationships over the years across different brands, from Nesquik to Nestle Crunch, with different sports properties. So, specifically with Nestle Crunch, we had a longstanding relationship with the NBA and Shaquille O'Neal as our spokesperson. And we're able to do some really fun events with Shaq. And that was just a great intro into the power of not just working with a celebrity, but a sports celebrity, and the fandom, for that comes with that. When NIL passed, we were in a very different position as a small business with very, low funds in terms of marketing. And we started to get some DMs on Instagram. Are you doing NIL? And I quickly realized we need to figure this out. So let's just say yes and figure it out, right? Like, we didn't have a plan, but we could make one. And so we started just working with anyone that reached out. We weren't proactively reaching out to people. It was very much an inbound situation. But we quickly realized, okay, we can activate with a product that people love. If we can provide a high value product to athletes that help them recover, that make a difference in how they feel, how they perform, then we're providing a lot of value. And so we structured it around that insight.
Looking back on that, what were some of the immediate things that you guys learned as you're, literally building the plane as you're flying it?
So I think, the tendency when you look at sports, and especially D1 sports, is you have like the money sports, or the ones that get the TV contracts or the attention. But what you learn is that if you have a standout, cross country runner or a lacrosse player, the likelihood that their majority of their followers do that same thing is very high. Whereas when you have a baseball or football or basketball athlete that's really a standout, you just sometimes have people that love that sport or love that athlete. So what we found is that by going into some of these more niche areas, we could reach an audience that could really relate to the experience that the athlete was sharing, because it was so personal to them as well.
I know we talked about this a little bit when we last spoke, but are there any niche sports in particular that you guys look to work in?
I would say, again, it's not necessarily that we are specifically looking for it, but we
Hmm.
do get incredible reach out from everything from archery, to wrestling. Like I wish we had a Z sport, but I mean, A to W for sure. We have reach out from sports that I didn't even know was a sport to, just a huge interest. And so specifically for the Paris Olympics, that was our first Olympics where we were really able to activate and we were able to partner with both athletes as well as teams from water polo to rugby to track and field to wrestling, boxing. So it was a really incredible experience to see that we help really anyone. And through our work with athletes, we developed this insight that not only can we help them with their training recovery, but travel was a really big pain point for so many
Hmm.
athletes. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter whether you're flying on a private plane, or you're commuting in a bus or a train. When you're sitting still for long periods of time and then you stand up, your legs just don't feel good. And so when you're on your way to compete and be at your best, we can help anyone with that, whether that's a business person, et cetera. So that's where we just found this ability to work across really any sport and even beyond that, with our product.
So I know, and this is a topic that I want to dive into a little bit later, but a lot of the times you had said that the athletes that were reaching out to you were people that were using the product already, whether like they had it in their training room and whatnot. So I want to go on that part of it later, but what I want to talk about now is what did that reach out look like? Like what was the good, the bad, the ugly? What worked, what didn't work when athletes were pitching themselves to you?
Sure. So, in terms of the good, the bad, the ugly, I mean, we would be thrilled if we had someone that had a strong social presence. And what I mean by that is a large number of engaging posts. So not just post after post, like I'm, holding up my Firefly, I'm holding up my beverage, really telling stories about them as an athlete. So a great reach out would be someone who had, several thousand followers, loved to post, posted frequently about themselves as opposed to just products. So as a true organic storyteller. The ugly would be someone with 50 followers, a private account, zero posts, hypothetically, those types of things where you're thinking, I'm not sure that, you might be interested in going into social, but probably before you enter NIL or kind of this social media genre, you need to develop some of the skills like of making content, getting an audience, things like that. So that was a little bit of a learning curve. But then, from there, and I think you and I spoke a little bit about that. I know I'm jumping ahead, but it isn't all about the followers.
Yeah. And I want to dive into that a little bit more. You specifically talked about like engagement and content quality. It kind of answers itself, but why is that so important to you guys? And why has focusing on that benefited you guys in these NIL relationships?
So I think, as social media continues to evolve, things that worked at one point obviously shift. And none of us can really predict like, oh, that's the video that's going to go viral. So we've had, on TikTok, we've had videos get as many as 27 million views. And if you had seen that video and you were sitting there editing it and giving feedback and kind of going through rounds and rounds, you probably wouldn't have said like, oh yeah, that video is ready to go. It's going to crush it.
Yeah.
But you can't always predict that. So what we have decided is it's really, if athletes or content creators have an ability to connect with their audience, to create videos that are trending, that are interesting, those are going to perform better than just looking at people who have strong, big following and maybe just put up the bare minimum, like that static image of holding the, product. Like that's a hard sell. You have to really be at like that elite level to be able to do that. So when we look at engagement is generally a sign that people like the athlete, they like what they're posting, You can see that through shares, through bookmarks, through comments, likes,
Yeah.
right? All of that. And sometimes it's a very small audience in terms of the number of followers, but they can find so much reach beyond their own followers because of the quality of what they're producing.
So obviously that's one of the first things that you guys look at when an athlete pitches themselves to you and you go and look at their profile. What else immediately jumps out to you guys when you're looking at an athlete's social media profile?
Yeah. So I think, again, I was sort of alluding to that a little earlier, is that balance of personal and professional, if we will. So
Uh-huh.
professional to me is just like branded, paid, sponsored. And if the, first 6, 9 posts are that, I think that's where you start to see the engagement go down. But if that's woven in to really telling about who they are as an athlete, what's important to them, just in terms of performance, life, etc. It's not all, then I think you see this is where I pull in the engagement because they're goofy or they're funny or they're just interesting. So we're looking for that balance versus just like this is a clearly just a page, and we see that so often. I would say more on the content creator side where it's just like, they're showcasing their content creation and they're willing to give you that well, not give you, but let you purchase that content. That's a very different situation than people who are following a journey of an athlete and really interested in like taking tips from them, learning from them, et cetera. So that's where we're looking for those people who want to share that journey or that experience of being a professional athlete, being a D1 athlete, being an Olympian. So many of us dream about that. And so if we can go along for the ride and we really feel like we're going with them and we're not just kind of being pushed product, I think that's a lot more interesting and pulls in a lot more people.
So I want to dig in on that a little bit more. And I think I mentioned this when we first spoke, but authenticity. If I had a nickel for every time somebody said that on the show, I wouldn't need to do the show, because we hear it all the time. So what does that authentic content look like? Is it an athlete doing a not get ready with me, but like, hey, this is what my workout looks like, and then either before or after the workout, you see them actually putting on the device? Can you talk a little bit just more about what authenticity looks like in what you guys are specifically looking for?
Yeah, I think when you look at branded content, there's so often like a cookie cutter version of it where, the athletes will see like, oh, someone else did this, so that's a great idea. And I
Yeah.
think when the athletes are willing to either be vulnerable, we can use the word authentic because it really does show like truth in their life. Like this is a
Mhm.
struggle that I have. This is something that, was tough for me. I was having a hard time managing, as a, let's say, a professional, like my family life and my recovery, or as a collegiate athlete, school and my social life, and all the travel. When they're kind of bringing it to where they are admitting there are some problems. We all have problems, right? But it's like that's where I think the authenticity comes from. Is it's not like, oh, everything's fantastic and you can also buy this product. It's like, being a little bit more authentic, that like this is hard, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone has parts of their life that are hard. And if you're showing like, this is a hard part of my life and this is how I manage it,
Yeah.
I think it is a lot more interesting than just like, get ready with me and I throw this thing on. And it's like, okay, well, that's nice for you, right? But like, I don't know why I care.
Is that content that then specifically drives results for you guys because their followers, like you mentioned previously, are people that participate in the same sort of activities and they're like, oh, I have this same problem too. This is how they attack it. Maybe it can work for me as well.
I think it can be a number of things. I think if it's relatable, right? So, like, if
Okay.
you are a former athlete, whether that's high school, all the way through, some of the pro leagues that maybe aren't like that are the G League in basketball, or the
Mhm.
farm system in baseball. you are spending time on buses and sitting around airports and sitting in hotels. And it's like, we oftentimes see like the glamour, right? Like the tunnel shots with all the high
Yeah.
fashion, and everyone's like, wow,
Mhm.
that is amazing. And it is, it's super fun to watch. And that is not relatable, but it's still really fun. But there's these other moments that maybe aren't as glamorous, but that so many people can relate to. It doesn't matter what sport you do, you can relate to being on that like endless bus ride with your teams. Like, what are we going to do to get through the hours or whatever? So when they make a video that's just showing them on the bus, and they're all
Yeah.
their feet are twitching from the Firefly, like it just is intriguing because they're kind of like, oh my gosh, my whole team sits on the bus. Like, what is that? That looks cool. So I think it's sometimes it's not so sport specific in that way. It's
Mhm.
something that's just this relatable moment of life that,
Yeah.
that can really break through, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the two things to focus in on then is the relatability and the authenticity of it all. Is that what makes content created by student athletes maybe what helps it outperform better than, hey, some influencer that has, 40 million followers?
And humor, like those are, I would say, kind of, yes. So um we at AthleteCon, just bringing it back, we had a competition where,
Mhm.
various athletes, NIL athletes, there were making a video, and the one that outperformed was completely different. So it was humorous and it was relatable. She set up a situation. Her name is Grace. She's going to be our summer intern as a result of AthleteCon, which is awesome. And Grace set up a video that we had never seen this concept before. And immediately it performed. Like within a few hours, it had 100,000 views.
Wow.
And she was sitting with a guy and her foot was tapping and she was on a fake date. And so it was like kind of the nervousness of the date, but then it revealed that, oh, she was actually wearing Firefly. She wasn't nervous. And it was just a funny concept. We had never seen anything like that. And, there was a lot of creativity with some of the other athletes and some really fun videos. So, like, shout out to all of them. But this is just an example of where within an hour of posting, you could just see that video surge ahead in terms of views. And if I would have come up with it myself and said, like, we're going to make this video, everyone would have thought, why? But then here you see it and it is relatable. It's also funny. And so I think that's where sometimes that intersection, whatever that looks like, is something that can really break through the noise, if you will, and perform.
Moving on to like post NIL, some of your biggest ambassadors were athletes that first used the product when they were student athletes.
Yes.
What makes those long-term relationships so valuable? And what kind of advice do you have to student athletes when they are working with brands in not in their NIL infancy, but as an NIL athlete to help that kind of blossom into something that could, be with them years after they're done with their collegiate career?
So we'll go back to your favorite word of authenticity. So if you authentically love a brand, you are going to have a much easier time making content. Like, because it's just automatically, you don't have to think about, how do I talk about this brand? How do I weave it into my story? It's already there, because if you're really truly using it, you just have the ideas pop into your mind. So I think the advice for NIL athletes are, if you have a brand or a product that you love, reach out to that brand, because A, you might think of something in a different way, or B, you may be able to just create really engaging, relatable content because you
Mhm.
are a true brand user. So that's, something. And that's for us. If we definitely can see instances where we can tell this person probably doesn't really use the product just because of where it's placed or how they're talking about it. So the brands know their brand so well, right? We know
Yeah.
our products, and the little small nuances that maybe don't stick out to someone who doesn't really use it, it's
Yeah.
evident. So I think that's where If you have a brand that you love, like you're already so far ahead, right? Because we take out all the education process and the actual brand love, that's hard to foster. And I think that's something, no matter how much you pay an athlete, if they don't truly love your product, they don't truly love your product. So if you can get people that authentically love your product, that's going to come through in how they talk about it, how they weave it in again. Those are the ones that maybe go above and beyond the check of like, oh, I need to do one reel. I'm wearing it here. I'm
Yeah.
getting off the bus with it. You see those times where it shows up. And we've been super fortunate as a brand, even athletes that we don't have an actual relationship with,
Mhm.
because we do sell to over 1,300 pro and collegiate teams. Our product shows up consistently in those moments, those, walk to the plane or walk off the bus or walk in the tunnel. And you can't buy that if you don't have huge budgets, right? But if you
Yeah.
have a great product, you can show up in really surprising places. And then we have an incredible community that sees that and wants to share it with us. Like, oh my gosh, did you see you were on this Netflix show, Receiver with George Kittle? We weren't the first ones to spot that. We can't watch every piece of content made, but we have this incredible community that loves to see these moments and will share them with us, whether it's the athletic training community that works with our sales team to support their athletes. So that's been a really fun piece of developing this community of people that love our brand.
Well, I think something that you just said just reminded me of two things. One, it's you mentioned Shaquille O'Neal. He famously, only works with brands that he himself could see using. And then two, you also never know when or where brands are going to be watching and then want to get involved with you. So if it's a brand that you authentically love, show it off in your real life, in your real habits. And, you never know what's going to happen with that and how or when it's going to get back to the brand for using their product.
Absolutely. I mean, we look at it all the time. We look at our sales and we'll see, oh, this pro athlete just bought our product. We should reach out. Those types of things. I mean, we're watching and even though we're growing, we're still trying to keep an eye on that, looking at where we pop up, and seeing if there's an opportunity to work with those athletes. I do think that it is finding that balance as an athlete,
Mhm.
if you truly use something and then that a different version of that brand approaches you, you kind of have to think about that because
Yeah.
your brand is you. And the more trusted you are, I think in the end, in the short term, it doesn't necessarily pay out, but in the long term, I think it really does because then you are able to truly show the brands that really help you be, perform at your best, be at your best, etc.
Shifting gears for a little bit.
Sure.
So we have a lot of NIL directors that listen to the show, and they are the ones that are sitting down with the student athletes and, having conversations with them. And it's like, okay, what are the brands that you love? And they say, oh, I love Firefly. We use it
Yes.
in the training room. I love it. It really helps me. If you were to able to talk to NIL directors, what advice would you give them to then help pitch to help the student athletes then pitch themselves to you or any other brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really, everyone wants a Nike contract. Like we've grown up watching, right, all of the Nike athletes that are, those mega brands. Everyone wants that. But there are smaller brands that may be truly making a difference in your life. And I think that to start with those relationships and really get the foundation down of like how to make good content, maybe you work with three brands and you get guidance that's different from all three, but it is an educational process. And I think those smaller brands are easier to get started with. And
Sure.
then you build. And I think that's the thing is everyone wants to start with like the showstopper. And I get
Yeah.
that, like, of course. But that is a much harder thing to do because the big brand, and I've sat there too, is going to look at like, what have you done? And you don't
Yeah.
see anything. Whereas I'd rather see, oh, they worked with this brand I've never even heard of, and they were able to get that many views, that much engagement. Imagine with a brand people have actually heard of. Like, that's exciting, right? So not to hesitate to take those smaller ones to sort of practice and learn, because like any skill, like the skill of being an incredible athlete, this is something that also takes practice. And so like learn with these smaller brands so that you can be ready for that huge opportunity.
Obviously, NIL has evolved tremendously since it was first passed. And we have seen, iterations continue to not necessarily change, but different iterations of NIL. Where do you see the next opportunity for brands and athletes going over the next few years?
Gosh, that is a hard one to predict because I do think, we're seeing these like mega contracts with the schools. And I think there are a lot of people that wonder, about some of the sustainability, with the transfer portal. There's so many
Mhm.
pieces at play right now. So it's a little bit hard to like narrow in and specifically say, because I think some of those other elements play a big role. Um, but I think you're going to continue to see the growth in NIL. And I think when we use the term NIL, like everyone thinks college, because obviously
Yeah.
that was the passage, right? But name, image,
Yeah.
likeness is something that's been used in the advertising world
Yeah.
forever. And so I think that concept of name, image, likeness, as it moves into high school, it's kind of like, that's unavoidable, obviously. And we're seeing that state by state. So is there going to be some kind of more national movement around that? Hard to say, but I do think it is here to stay. I think it will continue to evolve. And I also hope that, on some level, the athletes have a chance to also just get to be, students and have that experience, because you just see all the pulls on them, and it's a lot. And so I don't know what the answer is for that, but I do see how much is being asked of them, and I know that it's tricky to balance it.
No, that was great. Okay, so our last question. This is something that we ask to everybody. You live in the greater Los Angeles area. When someone comes to visit, where's your go-to spot to take them to eat, to give them, a little taste of Los Angeles?
So where I live is in Encino, so it's a lot of amazing sushi restaurants are in this area. And we have a place called Nico, Niko Sushi, that is kind of a hole in the wall. It's amazing. It just doubled in size. And for sure, if you want a fantastic sushi experience, they just added DJs on Friday nights. Like, it's kind of that combination of just
Okay.
really amazing food and a great time.
Sushi and vibes. What else? What else could you want more? I'll add it to my Google Map and save it for the next time I'm in LA.
Absolutely.
Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm so glad we connected at AthleteCon and look forward to, staying connected.